with a royal guest who refuses to play by the rules. In just 34 seconds, a single comment would spark the most explosive confrontation ever broadcast on late-night television, ending with security escorting a prince off the stage while cameras kept rolling. Graham Norton had seen it all. Decades behind the desk, thousands of guests, countless unexpected moments. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold on this particular evening. The audience settled into their seats. The familiar theme music faded out, and Graham walked onto the stage with his signature warmth and charm. "Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the show," Graham said, his Irish accent putting the crowd at ease immediately. "We have quite the lineup tonight. Please welcome our first guest, Prince Harry." The audience applauded as Prince Harry walked out, waving briefly before taking his seat on the famous red couch. Graham smiled and leaned forward, ready to begin the conversation with his usual blend of humor and genuine interest. "Harry, wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining us," Graham said warmly. "Thanks for having me," Harry replied, settling back into the couch with an air of casual confidence. Graham glanced at his cards and smiled. "Now, I have to ask because everyone wants to know. You've been quite vocal lately about your experiences, your life, all of it really. How are you finding things now?" Harry shifted slightly. "You know, Graham, I think people need to understand what I've been through. The media, the pressure, the constant scrutiny. It's not easy being me." Graham nodded politely. "Of course, I can only imagine the unique challenges that come with your position. But you've also had extraordinary opportunities that most people could only dream of, haven't you?" The first hint of tension appeared on Harry's face. "Is that what you think? That I should just be grateful and shut up about the difficulties?" Graham's smile remained, but his tone became more measured. "Not at all. I'm simply saying that perhaps there's a balance to be struck between acknowledging hardship and recognizing privilege." Harry leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge. "You have no idea what it's like, Graham. You sit here in your comfortable studio, asking your comfortable questions, making people laugh, when you've never had to deal with what I've dealt with." The audience fell silent. This was not the playful banter they were used to on Graham's show. Graham maintained his composure, years of experience showing through. "Harry, I think we all face challenges in different ways. My job is to have conversations, to listen, to engage. That's what we're doing here," Graham said calmly. "Your job is to make entertainment out of people's lives," Harry shot back. "To pry and probe and then package it all up for ratings. How is that any different from the tabloids I've spent my life fighting against?" Graham took a breath. "Well, for one thing, my guests choose to be here. They come willingly to share what they're comfortable sharing. There's no intrusion, no violation of privacy." Harry laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Choose to be here? You think everyone who sits on this couch actually wants to be here? They come because they have to, because their publicists tell them to, because it's part of the game." "And yet you're here," Graham pointed out gently. "I'm here because I was told it would be good for my image," Harry said bluntly. "To show I'm normal, relatable, all of that nonsense. But sitting here now, listening to your questions, I'm wondering why I bothered." The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut. Graham's expression remained professional, but something had shifted in his demeanor. This was his show, his space, and his patience was being tested. "Harry, I understand you've been through a great deal, but I have to say, I've welcomed you onto this program with nothing but respect. My questions have been fair and thoughtful. If you're finding this difficult, perhaps we should discuss what you'd rather talk about." Harry waved his hand dismissively. "See, there it is again. That condescending tone. You all do it. You pretend to care, pretend to understand. But really, you just want the juicy bits. You want me to spill secrets about my family, so you can get your clicks and your views. That's not what this is," Graham said firmly. I've built my career on having genuine conversations with people. I don't ambush guests. I don't exploit them. And I certainly don't appreciate being compared to the worst elements of media intrusion. Oh, touched a nerve, have I? Harry said with a smirk. The truth hurts, doesn't it, Graham? Graham sat up straighter. You know what, Harry? I've been doing this for a very long time. I've interviewed everyone from Hollywood legends to political figures, to musicians, to authors. Some have been difficult, some have been shy, some have been provocative. But I've never had someone sit on this couch and insult not just me, but the entire premise of respectful conversation. Respectful? Harry scoffed. You want to talk about respect? Where was the respect when photographers chased my mother? Where was the respect when every detail of my life was plastered across newspapers? Where was the respect when I was growing up in a fishbowl? None of that was me, Graham said quietly but firmly. I had nothing to do with that, and neither did this audience. Neither did my crew. You're sitting here taking out your anger on people who have only shown you kindness. Harry stood up suddenly. Kindness? This whole thing is a farce. You parade people out here, make them dance for the audience, and call it kindness. Well, I'm done dancing. Graham remained seated, his voice steady. Then perhaps you should leave. The audience gasped. In all his years of hosting, Graham had never asked a guest to leave. The moment hung in the air like a held breath. Excuse me, Harry said, his face flushing. You heard me, Graham said, standing now to face his guest. If you're done, if this is such a terrible experience for you, then you're free to go. I won't keep you somewhere you don't want to be. Harry's jaw clenched. You're kicking me off your show? I'm giving you the choice you claim you never have, Graham replied evenly. You can stay and we can have a real conversation, or you can leave. But what I won't do is sit here and be berated for trying to do my job with integrity. Integrity, Harry repeated mockingly. That's rich coming from someone in your industry. Graham's expression hardened. My industry? Harry, you've spent your entire adult life using the media when it suits you, giving interviews when you want to share your story, posing for photographs when you have something to promote, appearing on programs like this when you need public support. You can't have it both ways. You can't use the platform and then spit on it. How dare you, Harry said, his voice rising. You don't get to lecture me about anything. Do you know who I am? The words hung in the air, and in that moment, the entire tone of the encounter crystallized. Graham's face showed a mixture of disappointment and resolve. Yes, Harry, I know exactly who you are. But do you know where you are? This is my show. These are my guests, my audience, my crew. And I've worked for 30 years to build something based on warmth, humor, and mutual respect. I don't care about titles or status. I care about how people treat each other. Harry pointed at Graham. You're going to regret this. Do you understand the consequences of how you're speaking to me right now? Is that a threat? Graham asked, his voice calm, but his eyes sharp. It's a statement of fact, Harry replied coldly. I have a voice, I have a platform, and I won't hesitate to use it. Graham nodded slowly. Then I suppose we're at an impasse, because I also have a voice and a platform, and I won't hesitate to stand up for what's right. This conversation is over. He turned to someone off camera. Can we get security, please? Harry's eyes widened. You're actually going to have me removed. You've made it clear you don't want to be here, Graham said. I'm simply helping you with your exit. The audience sat in stunned silence as two security personnel appeared from the wings. They approached carefully, respectfully. Sir, if you'll come with us, one of them said quietly to Harry. Harry looked around, seeming to realize for the first time that he had pushed too far. This is absurd. You can't treat me like this. I'm treating you exactly as I would treat anyone who behaves this way on my program, Graham said. With the door. Harry's face went through several emotions at once: anger, embarrassment, disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. Finally, he shook his head. Fine, I'm leaving. But this isn't over, Graham. Not by a long shot. It is for me, Graham replied simply. As security gently guided Harry toward the exit, he stopped and turned back one more time. You're making a huge mistake. Graham stood his ground, hands clasped in front of him. The only mistake I made was not ending this sooner when it became clear you had no interest in a genuine conversation. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Harry. I truly do. But you won't find it by burning bridges with everyone who tries to meet you halfway. Harry stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked off the stage, security following behind him. The studio doors closed, and for several seconds, nobody moved. The audience didn't know whether to applaud, gasp, or sit in silence. Graham took a deep breath and returned to his chair, and he looked directly at the camera, his expression a mixture of sadness and resolve. Well, he said softly, that was unexpected. A nervous laugh rippled through the audience. Graham smiled slightly, though the warmth didn't quite reach his eyes yet. You know, in all my years doing this show, I've always believed that conversation is a two-way street. It requires both people to show up with openness and respect. When that breaks down, when one person decides they're going to use the platform as a weapon rather than a bridge, well, you saw what happens. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The audience waited, hanging on every word. I don't take pleasure in what just happened. I genuinely wanted to have a good conversation with Harry. I think he has interesting perspectives and experiences to share. But I also won't compromise the values this show was built on. We treat people with kindness here. We listen. We laugh. We connect. And when someone comes in with anger and resentment, determined to see enemies where there are only friends, it's impossible to move forward. Graham looked down at his cards, then back up at the audience. I've interviewed thousands of people on this couch. Some were nervous, some were guarded, some were going through difficult times. But we always found a way to have a real moment together. Because that's what this is about. Real moments. Real conversations. Not performances or power plays. The audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a standing ovation. Graham looked genuinely touched, his eyes misting slightly. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for understanding. Now, we're going to take a quick break, regroup, and when we come back, we'll continue with our other scheduled guests. Because the show, as they say, must go on. The audience erupted into applause, showing their full support for Graham. He acknowledged them with a small nod before sitting back down in his chair. The cameras remained rolling, capturing every moment of this unprecedented situation. Graham composed himself, running a hand through his hair. You know, he said to the audience, his voice carrying the weight of the moment, I've had some unusual shows before. I've had guests who've had perhaps a bit too much to drink before coming on. I've had people who've been so nervous they could barely speak. I've even had someone fall asleep mid-interview. But I've never, not once, had someone come on this program with such open disdain for the entire process. The audience murmured in agreement. One woman in the front row called out, "You did the right thing, Graham." He smiled at her gratefully. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because honestly, in the moment, you're not thinking about right or wrong. You're just trying to navigate a situation that's spiraling out of control. And I kept asking myself, what more could I have done? How else could I have approached this? He paused, looking thoughtful. I started with gentle questions. Questions that would allow him to share whatever he felt comfortable sharing. When that didn't work, I tried redirecting. When he became hostile, I remained calm. I gave him multiple opportunities to reset, to take a breath. And to remember that we're all just people trying to have a conversation. But at every turn, he chose aggression over engagement. Graham leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. And here's the thing that really struck me during that exchange. It wasn't just that he was angry. People are allowed to be angry. They're allowed to have complicated feelings about their experiences. What bothered me was the assumption that his anger entitled him to treat everyone around him as the enemy. The audience, the crew, me, we're all just trying to do our jobs and create something entertaining and meaningful. We're not the villains in anyone's story. The audience clapped again, longer this time. Graham waited for the applause to die down before continuing. You heard him say, "Do you know who I am?" And in that moment, I realized that's the heart of the problem. He came here believing his identity, his status, would shield him from the basic expectations we have for every guest. That somehow, the rules of common courtesy didn't apply to him. And I simply couldn't let that stand. He stood and walked to the front of the stage, closer to the audience. I've interviewed members of royal families before. I've interviewed presidents and prime ministers. I've interviewed people whose names are known around the world. And you know what? The best conversations, the most memorable moments, have come when those people set aside their titles and their status and just talk to me like one human being to another. That's when the magic happens. That's when we connect. Graham's voice grew stronger, more passionate. But you can't force that connection. You can't manufacture genuine conversation when one person is determined to see everything through a lens of persecution and resentment. I tried. I really did try. But there comes a point where you have to accept that some people aren't ready or willing to meet you halfway. He walked back to his chair and sat down, the weight of the evening visible in his posture. The moment he threatened me, that's when I knew it was over. You're going to regret this, he said, as if the consequence of treating him like every other guest would be some terrible punishment, as if standing up for basic decency was something I should fear. Graham shook his head. I don't live my life in fear of powerful people being upset with me. I live my life trying to be kind, trying to be fair, trying to create a space where interesting conversations can happen. And when someone comes into that space and tries to poison it with threats and hostility, they're not welcome anymore. It's really that simple. The audience member who had spoken up earlier called out again. He was so rude to you, Graham. You didn't deserve any of that. Graham's expression softened. Thank you, love. That's kind of you to say. And no, I don't think I deserved it. But I also don't think it was really about me. When someone comes at you with that much anger from the very start, it's usually about something much bigger. Something they're carrying with them. And while I have sympathy for whatever struggles he's facing, I can't allow those struggles to become weapons used against innocent people. He glanced at the empty couch where Harry had been sitting just minutes before. I wonder if he realizes what he did here tonight. I wonder if, once he calms down and has time to reflect, he'll understand that he sabotaged his own opportunity. Because this show reaches millions of people. It's a platform that could have been used to share his perspective, to build understanding, to connect with an audience that was ready and willing to listen to him. Graham's voice took on a tone of genuine sadness. Instead, he chose to burn it all down. And for what? To prove some point about media being terrible? To demonstrate that he's been victimized? All he actually proved is that sometimes the worst enemy we face is the one we bring with us. The anger we hold on to. The grievances we refuse to let go of. The studio was completely silent now, everyone hanging on Graham's every word. He continued, his voice quieter, but no less powerful. When he compared me to the tabloids that hounded his mother, that cut deep. Because anyone who knows me, anyone who knows this show, understands that we're the opposite of that invasive, destructive media culture. We invite people in. We ask them what they want to share. We create a safe, warm environment where they can be themselves. To have that compared to the paparazzi who chase people down streets, who invade privacy, who cause genuine harm, that was deeply unfair. Graham looked directly into the camera. But even then, even after that comparison, I tried to move forward. I tried to explain the difference. I tried to create an opening for better understanding. And he threw it back in my face with more accusations, more hostility, more contempt. At some point, you have to stop trying to reason with someone who's determined to misunderstand you. He stood up again, pacing slightly. The irony is that he came on this show presumably to improve his image, to show he's relatable and normal. And instead, he revealed exactly why people struggle to connect with him. It's not because he's royal. It's not because he's had a difficult life. It's because he approaches every interaction as a battle to be won, rather than a conversation to be had. Graham stopped pacing and faced the audience directly. I've had guests on this couch who've been through unimaginable traumas. People who've survived wars, abuse, loss, illness, and they've managed to sit here and have warm, funny, engaging conversations. They've found ways to share their pain without weaponizing it. They've used this platform to heal, to connect, to remind us all of our shared humanity. That's what this show is supposed to be. A celebration of human connection in all its messy, complicated, beautiful forms. The audience began applauding again, and this time Graham let himself smile more genuinely. Thank you. Truly. Your support tonight means more than you know. Because when something like this happens, when you have to make a difficult decision in real time, you wonder if you're being too harsh or not harsh enough. You question yourself. But seeing your reaction, feeling your understanding, it reminds me that most people recognize basic fairness when they see it. He returned to his chair one more time. I want to be clear about something. I don't hate Harry. I'm not angry with him. I'm disappointed. Disappointed that an opportunity for genuine dialogue was wasted. Disappointed that someone would come into this space and treat it with such contempt. But I don't wish him ill. I hope he finds peace. I hope he works through whatever anger and pain he's carrying. I just won't allow him to use this show as a dumping ground for that pain. Graham looked at his cards, then set them aside. You know what the hardest part was? The moment when I realized there was no saving this. The moment when I understood that no matter what I said or did, he was determined to turn this into a confrontation. Because I always believe in the possibility of turning things around, of finding common ground. It's what I do. It's who I am. But tonight taught me that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is end a bad situation before it gets worse. The audience nodded, many of them looking emotional themselves. Graham's vulnerability in this moment was unlike anything they'd seen from him before. When I called for security, my heart was pounding, because that's not something I ever imagined doing. This show is about openness, about welcoming people in. To have to ask someone to leave, it goes against everything I've built here. But it was necessary. It was the only way to preserve the integrity of what we do. And I'd make the same choice again, even knowing how uncomfortable it was. He took a deep breath. The look on his face when security approached, it was a mix of shock and indignation. Like he genuinely couldn't believe there would be consequences for his behavior. And that, more than anything else, showed me how far removed he's become from normal human interaction. Most people understand that if you treat someone poorly, they're not going to continue welcoming you into their space. But he seemed genuinely surprised that the rules applied to him too. Graham's voice grew stronger again. Well, they do apply. They apply to everyone who sits on this couch. I don't care if you're royalty or a first-time actor doing their first interview. If you come here with respect, you'll get respect.